Hello. Thank you for joining tonight. And I wanted to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Ashley Battaglia, and I am the Senior Manager of Business Development and Partnerships at the New York Institute of Finance. New York Institute of Finance was founded by the New York Stock Exchange in 1922 and has been training customers all around the world for almost 100 years. We are headquartered in New York and have local teams in Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, New Delhi, and Jakarta. Today, we are presenting a demonstration of the Young Finance Scholar Program presented by NYIF instructors, Chris Thomas. Chris is a senior lecturer in the areas of asset management in the family office. He's the managing director at Simon Quick, a multifamily office based in Morristown, New Jersey, and New York City. Our second presenter today will be Jimmy Pang. Jimmy is NYIF senior lecturer in areas of portfolio management and macroeconomics. He is a visiting professor at NYU where he teaches courses in portfolio management and applied equity research. Currently, he's also serving as a managing director, as managing director at Grayfin Capital Management and CEO of JKP Consulting LLC, managing high net worth family offices and private equity. And at the end, we will be conducting a Q&A and answering all of your questions with our curriculum director, Jack Farmer. Jack has been a curriculum director for the New York Institute of Finance for over 3 years. He also acts as an outside advisor for portfolio managers at significant global investment funds. And now we'll go ahead and get started. Please know that if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box feature. We will have a moderator that will be able to share your questions with the panelists, and we will answer them at the end of the session. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So over the years, NYIF has provided financial guidance to each new generation of private banking clients of large financial institutions, as well as recent college graduates who've received certificate training. Our years of experience tell us that mastering the basic knowledge of finance and business and learning how to review and analyze problems with a financial perspective is similar to teaching a person who doesn't understand music to learn how to play an instrument and appreciate it. As part of our continuing commitment to providing high-quality online professional education to learners everywhere, we have developed the Young Finance Scholar Program, comprised of 20 courses over the course of 4 weeks, plus 10 electives of high school and middle school students. So the Young Finance Scholar Program provides an extension of ability and literacy, especially for the youth, to gradually integrate into adulthood, improve their own thinking, and expand their confidence in communicating with adults. The instructors of NYIF, who you'll meet 2 of them tonight, whose careers are primarily in the financial field, are distinguished from the academic teachers in traditional schools. They are practitioners in the industry and have had extensive experience in their respective fields. We believe with programs like these, young students will have the opportunities to expand their network by interacting with our NYIF faculty, observing and networking with our community of professionals in finance and business, in addition to their family members at home and academic teachers and other groups in the school. The New York Institute of Finance has devoted itself for nearly a century to mentoring professionals, and we feel that our knowledge base and teaching expertise are a valuable resource for the long-term development and growth of young people. So due to the pandemic, we have specially designed this program to be delivered online for young students, and we hope to give you more options when arranging summer activities for your children this summer. While we're promoting this program in the US, we are also introducing it in other countries. Our plan is to attract students from different countries and cultural backgrounds to participate in this financial summer camp. So now, without further ado, we will begin the demonstration of the Young Finance Scholar Program. During this demonstration, we will briefly cover 5 topics from the program, starting with NYIF instructor Jimmy Pang, who will discuss what is business and how to set up a new company. Please note that this presentation is targeted for a middle school audience. And now I will turn it over to Jimmy.
Great, thank you, Ashley. So let me first share my screen correctly before we begin, and some of the beautiful slides that we've set up for everybody. Here we go. So just a little bit, Ashley gave a great introduction But just a little bit more about myself. I've actually been in finance since I was in college. So I was actually lucky enough to have started and known what I've wanted to do at a fairly young age. And the reality is that the younger you start, the better. I've also been fortunate enough to work at some fairly big firms. If anybody's in New York and in Midtown, you might have seen the big building, AllianceBernstein. So I was at AB for a number of years, and then ultimately ended up in Hong Kong with a big bank called Bank of Communications. But more importantly for everyone in this audience, I teach also at NYU from high school up to the master's programs. So ages of all across the board from young to advanced. And I think it's great with regard to this program that young adults get an opportunity to participate. Just a quick story, I went to Bronx Science, and even with Bronx Science, as advanced as it is, they haven't offered a business or finance program when I was there. So hopefully we can make those that can attend this even more fortunate to be able to participate and create an opportunity, even greater opportunity in life. So with that, let me actually give you a sample of some of the topics. The idea is to give you today a teaser of what you may learn throughout this program that's sort of customized to certain age groups. And the first topic is really just very broad. What is a business and the initial possible setup of a business? And business is, I think, everyone sort of knows what it is, but I think the idea is to create a mindset of an everyday approach to life and how you can begin to think deeper of, when you're going to a grocery store or you're on an app. I'm sure everyone recognizes these symbols, right? From Facebook to Snapchat to YouTube to Google, but do you really think about the underlying mechanics of how they make money? Some of these companies make money off of you and you don't know it. You may go to the grocery store and you're spending money, but how does that product end up on the shelf of that grocery store, and how do they make money? So I think it's just to begin to have that kind of mindset of when you go out, that business mindset, because ultimately, the hope is that each and every one of you at some point create your own company, right? Do you always want to work for somebody else? Probably not. Ultimately, everybody, it's not as hard as you think. You can create your own company. And here's just sort of a snapshot of how you may begin to understand what business is and the steps to perhaps, again, create your own company. So just some questions to think about, right? Part of this is to help you brainstorm and think about what's the last item that you bought from a store. Have you ever traded anything, from baseball cards to comic books, right? This is an actual business for many folks, right? When you go to a comic book store. Services, what service have you used? Maybe it's not a product. Amazon is a service that delivers a product to your doorstep, right? And they make a lot of money. What are some things that you have that you might trade? Don't trade your parents' sort of antiques and things like that, but certainly you can look through your basement and maybe you have collectibles. One of the examples that I might use later on is Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So I don't know how old some of you exactly are, but you might have encountered and played this game, which I'll have as an example later on. What are some funny business opportunities that you've seen, right? People make money off of all sorts of products, right? From pet products. There are shows such as Shark Tank and The Profit, which anybody can watch. And sometimes you do see sort of a teenager pitching their product on some of those shows. So the point is, business can be seen from any angle, and anybody can think of a business. And actually, if you have the willpower to create it, from buying or selling a good or service, as I mentioned about internet data and traffic, transactions, these are obviously can be a business when you see shipping goods. And whenever you go to sort of a store, I don't know if there are any gamers out there, but one of the examples we may use later on is also a gaming example. So let's start at the very basic, to just taking a step back, right? Many hundreds of years ago, the biggest business was probably just to be a farmer, right? To put food on the table. So we've evolved since then as human beings, and we want to purchase more than just food on the table. But this is an actual business, and it's still a business, right? Selling soybeans to other countries. America does do that. We also buy products from Latin America to feed ourselves. So that's certainly a trade or a business. Some of you might have a hobby, and that certainly can be a business, clearly, with art projects. That it's not just a hobby. If somebody has a demand for your beautiful service or good, you can actually make what's called a living on that. And that's building a business. And even more so now on social media, you might see people painting themselves or painting a picture, and the number of views, depending on the clicks, can actually make you money, right? The Facebook likes, right? That's just not, they don't do that for no reason. It's actually to create income. And of course, you see, if you go out in the daily world, you might see somebody with a suit and tie, a man or a woman, and they go to work and have a profession, be it an accountant, or stocking shelves at Amazon. Certainly, if you have a passion for something, you can begin to create income from that. And one of the other great examples now, of course, with everybody ordering online and us, teaching remotely, of course, is ordering something to your home with goods and services, and it's going to going to become even more sophisticated going forward. It might not even be delivered by a person, right? It could be a bot, or a golf cart that's remote. But certainly this is e-commerce, right? You've all heard of e-commerce as a booming business, and anybody could sort of create an online store, really, with global trade. So here's a map, in terms of this global trade. And that's the beauty of it, right? With respect to folks on this call, you could also be located anywhere in the world and looking at this presentation remotely, but you can build a good or a service that maybe it's just not appealing to folks in America. It could be appealing to folks in Germany, and they can have access to your product. And so the world is your oyster, and the more you understand business and ideas, and educate yourself, the bigger the opportunity, right? And here's just a flow chart of how international trade can be conducted if you import products bringing into your country, and then maybe export, which is goods that's traded and demanded outside of your home country. Some of you guys might have heard of a company called Alibaba, right? So that's actually the Asia version of Amazon. So just as a summary, you can certainly create products, but e-commerce is booming. You can make a living from still being a farmer, right? There's a lot of demand for that as well still, in terms of farm to table, right? Bringing an organic chicken or organic meat into your living room to eat. So there's always opportunities abound to create a business. And so it's not as hard as you think. Right? So setting up a company, some people might think it's extremely complex, but it's actually not. When I was 18, I wrote just sort of a little booklet on investing in markets, and actually I created a sole proprietorship. Right? Why did I do that? Because it's actually very easy to set up. Just go to the bank, tell them you want to create it, ask an accountant to sort of register it. And a sole proprietorship, the beauty of it is that it's just yourself. Other setups, if you want to have friends and family involved, which could be a little bit more complicated, right? As you know, you have to get along with your friends. That's when you want to create a partnership, an LLC. It's called a limited liability company. And then when you want to create something even bigger, which I believe Chris will talk about later on, you may actually create a C Corp and develop it into a C Corp where other people and more, a greater audience can invest in yourself and your company. So we're not going to go into, right, we don't have time to go into extraordinarily detail on each of these setups, but when you obviously perhaps participate in the course, there's going to be much more detail and explanation of the various terms. But here's a comparison of a sole proprietorship versus an LLC, a C Corp. And it's not as complex as you think. Just have an accountant. You can even register it yourself with the state. But you do have to decide in terms of some certain concepts, how much control you want. There are some terms that you might have to understand later on called liquidity, taxes, and control. So that'll help you determine which one of these setups you can most benefit from. And then lastly, really liability actually is another term, is very important in the US. And that's just a fancy way of saying if something happens, who's going to take the blame, right? So that's liability, blame, taxes. Those are probably the two most important issues when it comes to setting up your own company. And so here's a very easy summary that anybody can understand, keeping in mind, if you don't want to start the company yourself, then you might have friends that help you, but here's the key, right? You have to be able to get along with your friends and your best friends if you're going to start a company and partnership with them. And you can see many examples of that abound, which we'll talk about later on when we talk about companies. And so with many of these modules, we'll also have breakout activities. You won't be doing it alone in a sort of a boring lecture. You'll be able to interact with your peers, certainly with guidance from ourselves and your teachers. The last part of this, I'll just end it with just a quick quiz, if you will. You guys don't have to answer at the moment. I'll answer it for you. But the interesting thing about companies, it's that very diverse in terms of the founders. You might have a computer company started by 2 college dropouts. You might have a burger company started by a high schooler. You might have a computer company started from a person in a dorm room, right? So that person who started the company, the computer company, was Michael Dell at a very young age, right? And he created a phenomenal company at a very young age. The high school dropout with the burger joint, if anyone's wondering, was actually Wendy's. Yeah, so those that are thinking about eating burgers, now you know who founded Wendy's. And the last one was actually probably the most popular one, Apple, with the Macintosh. Right when I was beginning college, that's when they started Apple, and that was Steve Jobs, who's quite famous now. And then the other person who actually made the hardware, right? So there's certain expertise that you might have with your partners, where Wozniak was actually the hardware person and Steve Jobs was the salesperson, right? So let me sort of finish off there. We're going to have case studies a little bit later, and some things to think about for yourselves going forward is, right, and it doesn't matter how young you are. You could begin thinking about what type of company, what are things that you're interested in, how can you create a service or a product that other people might enjoy.